Lecturer today. His name is Н.Перри. He is from the United States of America, and he's going to lead the lecture today on unconventional or non-traditional use of energy. So let's welcome him.
Yeah, so like Connie said, my name is Н.Перри. I'm from the United States. I was born and raised in New York City. If you know Danny Forche, I'm also a Fulbright scholar, but I'm actually a Fulbright scholar in simulation. I'm just visiting Danny for now. Let's get started. So today we're going to talk about unconventional sources of energy. And right now, energy is a huge problem right now in the United States. Energy is a huge problem right now in the United States. Something called energy independence. Now, energy independence is the ability to gain all your energy needs from within your own borders. And right now, the United States is the world's largest importer of foreign oil. We bring in 13.5 million barrels of oil per day. And much of this oil comes from countries where the United States really does not have very, very good relationship with. For example, 20% of the oil that comes into the United States is from the Middle East. Now, it is feared that basically that the United States is essentially fueling the war on terror that has dominated our foreign policy over the last 2 decades. James Woolley, the former director of the Central Intelligence Agency, says it best: "We are funding the rope for hanging of ourselves." Now, these concerns are not met without any basis. In October of 2002, an independent task force sponsored by the Council of Foreign Relations concluded that terrorist organizations, including Al-Qaeda, received most of their financing from conventional sources, including charities and personal donors. For example, it was reported that the Al-Tahrir Foundation, a former Saudi Arabia charity organization, which gets the majority of its money from the oil industry, has direct links to Al-Qaeda and has been supplying them with both weapons and money. Now, not only is our dependence on fossil fuels creating a security risk in terms of terrorism activity, but also, as resource scarcity becomes more widespread, the likelihood of violent civil conflict also rises as nations begin competing over a dwindling supply of non-renewable resources such as oil and coal. Relationships between the U.S. and other oil importing countries, most notably China, could seriously be strained as they compete over the dwindling resource. So, one source that has been the talk of much hope in the United States is unconventional resources. Now, we're going to define unconventional resources today as any type of resource that is not oil or coal. And here are some fairly common unconventional resources. Today we're going to mostly talk about shale gas, tar sand, and oil shale. So let's start with shale gas. Now, it's uncertain exactly how much shale gas is within the United States today. Estimates range from 170 trillion cubic meters of recoverable gas to 280 trillion cubic meters, which is enough to power the United States on current energy consumption rates for generations and generations to come. Also, from an environmental perspective, natural gas is fairly clean. It's known as the clean fossil fuel, if there can be a clean fossil fuel. It emits only about 40% of the CO2 emitted by a typical coal plant. And also, if we doubled our current use of natural gas, this could displace as much as 19% of the CO2 from coal in the United States. Now, within the last 15 years, there has been a frenzy of drilling for natural gas across the United States. In the state of Colorado alone, there have been 30,000 wells drilled. But one area that has been the talk of much hope is the Marcellus Shale, which is up here. And the Marcellus Shale is a black sedimentary shale formation that spans nearly 9,700 kilometers from the southern tip of New York through western Pennsylvania into eastern Ohio and through West Virginia, in total about 140,000 square kilometers. Now, geologists estimate the whole shale formation contains about 168 trillion to 500 trillion cubic meters of natural gas. This is more than 20 times the current U.S. annual output of natural gas. However, in order to extract the natural gas, which is lodged hundreds and hundreds of meters below the Earth's surface in very tightly held pore space, a fairly controversial process needs to be used. And this process is known as hydraulic fracturing. And hydraulic fracturing is essentially a procedure which sends a blend of water, sand, and chemicals at extremely high pressures deep below the Earth's surface. And what this does is the pressure cracks open the shale rock. And then the sand particles that I referred to before go into those cracks and leave it open. This allows the gas to shoot back up where it can be obtained at the surface. Now, the major problem with this procedure is the chemicals that I referred to earlier. There are over 200 known chemicals that are used in the hydraulic fracturing process. Unfortunately, due to legislative reasons, drilling companies are not required to reveal what is in those 200 chemicals to the public. However, some tests have been conducted, and it has been known that many of those chemicals have serious health effects that can cause neurologic disorders, birth defects, and some forms of cancer. The fear is that some of these chemicals can leak into the underground aquifers and reservoirs that supply the northeast of the United States their drinking water. In particular, it is feared that these chemicals could leak into the New York City watershed, which supplies drinking water for over 10 million people. So, we've talked a little bit about shale gas. Now it's time to move on to a few more unconventional natural resources. And I'm going to talk about now tar sand and shale oil. And I'm going to talk about them a little bit together because there's a lot of similarities. Tar sand is essentially a mixture of organic matter, sand, water, and bitumen. And this is bitumen right here. And bitumen is a heavy, black, asphalt-like hydrocarbon. And if you don't know, hydrocarbon can be refined and broken down to form a basic crude, oil. According to the U.S. Geologic Survey, over 80% of the world's recoverable bitumen is in North America. Experts estimate that there are 186 billion barrels of tar sand in Canada and the United States. This accounts for over 11% of the world's technically recovered oil reserves. Now, tar sand production only accounted for about 1.3% of the world's crude oil production in 2005. However, what some are calling the world's first unconventional oil boom is already underway, with major oil companies such as Chevron, Shell, and ExxonMobil already receiving approval by the United States and Canadian government to conduct major tar sand projects. It is believed that in the next 5 years, that over $75 billion will be put into tar sand projects. and that by the year 2025, tar sand yields will have quadrupled from current outputs. Now we're going to move on to shale oil. And like I said, shale oil is fairly similar to tar sand. The term shale oil generally refers to a type of sedimentary rock that holds keratin. And keratin is fairly similar to bitumen and tar sand. It's a solid organic substance that, when subjugated to very, very high temperatures, can be converted into a liquid hydrocarbon, which can then be subsequently converted into a form of crude oil. It is estimated that there are 2.6 trillion barrels of shale oil reserves throughout the world. Of these 2.6 trillion barrels, 2 trillion barrels are within the United States. The largest and most promising shale deposit in the U.S. is the Green River Formation. And this is the Green River Formation right here. It's the tannish that is highlighted right there. And the Green River Formation covers parts of Utah, Wyoming, and Colorado. Estimates about the reserves range from 1.2 trillion to 1.8 trillion barrels. It's believed that all of this, about 800 billion of those barrels, are recoverable. This would account for 3 times the proven oil reserves of all of Saudi Arabia. Now, tar sand and shale oil can be extracted in 2 ways. The first way is open pit mining. And open pit mining is by far the most economic way to extract tar sand. The only problem with it is it can only be conducted if the tar sand is about 100 feet to the Earth's surface. So before mining can even begin, though, the whole surface must be cleared. This includes trees, grass, soil, any human buildings that might be there. It all has to be cleared. Next, a large shovel is brought in and just scoops up the substance. The shovel transports the substance to these giant trucks that can carry up to 400 tons of the material. From here, the trucks transport the material to a refinery plant where they are subjugated to extremely high temperatures and can be converted into a basic form of crude oil. Now, for reserves that are buried too deep within their surface to qualify for open pit mining, in situ extraction is used. And in situ extraction consists of pumping steam down a vertical well. And this steam liquefies the bitumen and the keratin, which is then subsequently pumped back up to the surface of the well. And then, like in open pit mining, it's transported to a refinery and transformed into crude oil. Well, like in shale gas, there are many drawbacks to both shale oil and tar sand. The first one is that it's just not very economic or efficient. In order to extract in order to refine 3 barrels of oil from both tar sand and shale oil, 1 barrel of oil must be used. So effectively, you are getting 3 for the price of 1 and only getting a yield of 2. So for every 3 you make, you lose 1. Also, no matter how it's done, extraction of oil is a destructive procedure. According to the University of California, Berkeley study, all unconventional forms of oil are worse for greenhouse gas emissions than conventional petroleum. In the case of tar sand, total greenhouse gas emissions per barrel are between 15 and 40% higher than those from conventional oil. A shift of unconventional oil could add somewhere between 50 and 400 gigatons of carbon into the Earth's atmosphere by 2100. America already produces 19.4 metric tons of carbon dioxide per capita, making the U.S. responsible for 21% of all CO2 emissions in the world. With growing evidence and fear over environmental issues such as global warming, we cannot afford to explore these options at all. If current trends continue, it is believed that the global Earth temperature will rise 4 degrees Celsius by 2100. Now, another major concern associated with unconventional resources is the pipeline system that we need to be put in place in order to make them economically viable. The project that has perhaps gained the most attention and criticism is the Keystone XL, which is shown here. If approved, this 520-kilometer oil pipeline connecting the rich oil bitumen of northern Canada with the oil refineries of southern Texas would be operational by 2013. Advocates of the pipeline argue that its creation would ensure the United States a steady supply of energy for years to come, and making the United States much more energy independent and energy secure. They also argue that the pipeline would create thousands of jobs for Americans, give the states along the pipeline over $5.2 billion in property taxes, as well as bring in 1.1 million barrels of oil per day. Although this might sound extremely tempting, there are many environmental concerns associated with pipelines. One of the largest concerns is leaks. Bitumen is much more acidic than conventional oil. Therefore, it is much more likely to eat through a pipeline. Just last year, a bitumen pipeline leaked 3 million liters of the substance into the Kalamazoo River in Michigan. The Keystone XL is designed to go over several very key environmental areas in the United States, including the Alabama Aquifer, which is one, the heart of the American agricultural belt, and two, supplies drinking water to 2 million people in the area. Now we're going to turn our attention to a lighter note, to a more happy note, to renewable energy. And there are countless forms of renewable energy. And I've only included these 4 because these are the 4 most prominent forms of renewable energy in the United States today. And the most prominent one is hydroelectric power. So we're going to talk about that first. Now, hydropower refers to using water to just generate electricity. Water is the most common renewable source of energy within the United States today. Many hydroelectric plants basically use a dam along a river to store water. Water is released from behind the dam, which flows through a turbine, spinning it, which then turns a generator to produce electricity. Hydroelectric power is currently the largest producer of renewable energy within the U.S. right now. It produces about 6% of the nation's electricity, and the United States is the 4th largest producer of hydroelectricity in the world right now, only followed by China, Canada, and Brazil. Now, the next form of renewable energy that we're going to look at is wind energy. And wind energy, I think, is probably the most prominent and probably the most realistic form of renewable energy that exists today. Wind turbines usually have 2 or 3 blades, and because winds above the ground tend to be faster and less turbulent than the ones closer to the surface, wind turbines are placed on usually very tall towers, as you can see here. The central shaft, as the turbine spins, the central shaft spins a generator, which makes electricity. Wind energy currently only supplies America 3% of its electricity needs. However, the U.S. is quickly becoming the world leader in wind energy, and it is believed that by the year 2030, that wind energy will supply the United States with 20% of its energy needs. So that is a 17% increase in less than 20 years. So now solar energy. Solar technologies use the sun's energy to provide heat, light, hot water, electricity, and even cooling for homes, businesses, and industries. Despite sunlight's significant potential to be harnessed for renewable energy, solar power only provides 1% of the U.S.'s current electricity needs. This percentage is expected to increase with the development of new and more effective solar technologies. The reason that it's so small right now is just because solar energy is just not an economically viable option right now. It is extremely expensive. Of all the sources of renewable energy, solar is probably by far the most expensive right now, at least in the United States. However, just because it is the development of new technology and new information, hopefully this will change in the near future, because I think it's a great source of renewable energy. Finally, we're going to talk about biomass. And biomass basically is the power obtained from energy in plants, plant-derived materials such as food crops, grassy and woody plants, residues from agriculture or forestry, and even organic material derived from municipal and industrial waste. As you can see, biomass can range from any number of things. Bioplants can have huge factories, or technically burning a fireplace. Having a fireplace in your house is technically a renewable energy, a source of energy. That is technically biomass. Biomass power basically provides two valuable services to the U.S. The first is that it's the second most prominent form of renewable energy right now in the U.S. And the second is that it is a major part of our waste management infrastructure. Electricity generated from biomass is also called biopower. Biopower facilitates use many different technologies. The most common is burning wood. So you can see it's just very simple, it's just burning wood. Or other biomass feedstock to produce steam, which then is used to drive turbines and produce electricity. Okay. Any questions? Hey, how about I ask you guys some questions? Is that cool? Is that all right? Does anybody know what the most prominent form of renewable energy in Russia is? Does anybody have any guesses? Yeah. Natural gas. Natural gas? Yeah, natural gas, it's not renewable, but yes, natural gas is by far the most common source of energy in Russia. It's actually interesting. Russia basically has the opposite problem of the United States. Russia has too much energy, which is a good thing. And they're actually, I'm sure you guys know, able to sell a lot of their energy to the EU, to the EU countries that don't really have the natural resources that Russia has been blessed with. But actually the most common form of renewable energy in Russia is geothermal energy. Does anybody know what geothermal energy is? Huh? Huh. Does anybody know what geothermal energy is? Okay. Geothermal energy is basically, it's getting energy from the heat deep within the Earth's surface. So they're able to bring panels and drill them down deep within the Earth's surface and gather the heat from them and bring them back up and use that to power generators to make electricity. And does anybody know what like a geyser is? Or like a hot spring? That's an example of geothermal. So it's like in an area that you wouldn't expect to have something very, very hot, but it is.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of sun days during the year.
Yeah, same problem in the United States. Most of it, it's very expensive.
Hydro energy.
wind is also, I think, very, very, could be huge in Russia. Just like, being here for a little bit that I've been, could be quite windy, especially I've heard in the Altai region, it can be very, very windy. And wind energy is actually the cheapest of all forms of renewable energy. The only really downside of it is it can affect bird migrations, and many birds have been known to fly into wind turbines. So a lot of environmentalists are not too keen on the idea of wind energy. But other than that, I think it is by far the most possible of all the forms of renewable energy. Yeah, it has been known. It has almost all the processes that I've been talking about have been known to increase the likelihood of earthquakes. Hydrofracking in particular is you're drilling thousands and thousands of meters into the Earth's surface, and that's just bound to just make geological activity that much more turbulent. Pipelines, yeah. I think pipelines for natural gas are usually perfectly fine. It's the only problem with pipelines in the U.S. is, like I was saying, what they would be transforming is this thing called bitumen, which is really acidic, and it can eat through the pipeline. So they're worried that it will eat through the pipeline and cause leaks. Yes. New York. We actually, there's a nuclear power plant in the state that I'm from, and I'm sure most of you have heard of what happened in Japan fairly recently with the devastation of the nuclear power plant there. And there have been a lot of efforts in the last several months to shut down that nuclear power plant because it's dangerously close to New York City, where I'm from. But we also use a little bit. There's a lot of natural gas in New York State, but right now there is a ban on drilling for it, just because they don't know what the health implications will be. Natural gas. It can cause major health problems because the way to drill for it uses a lot of chemicals that can leak into drinking water supplies. Yeah. Okay. New York is an interesting state when it comes to the environment, because you have areas that are some of the most polluted areas in the United States, like New York City, Albany, Buffalo, major cities in the U.S. But you also have, New York is a huge state, and it is also one of the most protected, environmentally protected states in the United States. We have a park called the Adirondack Park, which is the largest non-national park in the United States, and it is extremely well protected. So New York is really a mixed bag when it comes to environmentalism.
You didn't tell us about the drawbacks of using biomass.
Oh, the drawbacks of using biomass? There actually really aren't that many drawbacks of using biomass, because generally it does produce some carbon dioxide, but generally because all the things were living at one point, it absorbs the carbon dioxide as well. So it basically reduces its own offload. So biomass is actually it's a good way. I think it's a very good way to, it's a very good source of renewable energy. The only thing is there's not much exploration into it yet. There's not much technology out there to really get the full economic benefits of it. Right now, it's just very costly. That's really the major drawback of renewable energy right now, which is cost. It's just expensive.
Well, but that is the percentage of deforestation.
Yeah, that's definitely, yeah. But a lot of the stuff that would be used for biomass, they would just use waste. So they would use municipal waste for biomass. But yeah, that's a good point. if you really want to do, like, biomass, I don't think could ever be something that can power a whole country. I think it could power a certain percentage, a small percentage. I think that's the case of renewable energy in general. I think maybe if they build up a lot of different types of renewable energy, it might be enough to power one country. But one type of renewable energy in particular, I don't think has potential to do that right now. Right now with our current technology. U.S. actually is going down on the list, but it's still the highest right now. China is skyrocketing right now. China, in probably the next 5 years, will be the top place by far. Just because they're modernizing so fast, and they have so many just huge cities, and cars are kind of like actually kind of a new thing in China, and the people are buying cars like crazy right now. There's just a lot more carbon emission than there was 10 years ago. China's just, and also India, they're just modernizing so fast.
Is it possible to produce enough energy by wind or solar stations to provide 3 cities with electricity, for example, in New York?
So for a big city, that's a good question. It all depends on the area. Wind and solar all depend on the area where you are. So if you're in an area there's a lot of wind and there's a lot of sunshine, then yeah, it could be possible. But a lot of areas aren't blessed with both of those things. So like I think in a lot of like the areas around the equator, there's very strong winds and there's also a lot of sunshine all year round. So I feel like, yes, that could be a viable option for places like that. But for New York City, it's just honestly, it's just too cloudy. I don't think solar is a great option for New York City. Solar is actually a very good option for individual homes. In the U.S. right now, you see a lot of homes with solar panels on top of their roofs. And that could potentially build enough energy to supply that home for their energy needs throughout the year. If they could obtain enough energy in the summertime when the sun is very, very strong and store that energy during the winter and then use that energy then. So I think solar is a very, very good source on the individual level, but probably not on the mass level. Yeah, when I was in Malaysia just a couple months ago, I went to a village, and the entire village was powered by solar energy. No, it's getting there. It's modernizing right now. Yeah, this particular village has gotten a lot of funding from sponsors in the United States. So this village is really an exception. It's not the rule.
Within the perspectives, how do you use energy to replace the traditional one?
Well, right now,
Will it happen?
I hope so. I really hope so for all of our states, just because of some of the environmental problems that are arising now. And but right now, oil and coal and natural gas are such a wealthy business. So much money is to be made in those businesses, and a lot of times people think with their wallets rather than their minds. And until there's enough money to be made in renewable energy, I don't really see renewable energy taking over conventional energy in the near future.
There's a chance something will move if the resources are depleted.
Yes, that resources. Right now, resources are depleted. That's why America has to bring in, like I said, 13.5 million barrels of oil every single day, because we don't have any oil anymore. And like I said earlier, a lot of countries are starting to compete over a very, very small supply of oil. And sooner or later, if people are competing over the same thing, they're bound to fight each other. So it might not even be an energy issue. It might be, this energy issue can turn into something like war. If you get that bad.
Well, the oil was when all this was treated, the stove still remains.
That's true. And coal can be turned into oil. Like I said, that's actually one of the that's a form of unconventional form of unconventional source of energy. There's a process to actually turn coal into a very, very basic type of crude oil. The only thing is it's very expensive. Most of the thing when it comes to energy, it's all about price.
Perhaps the coal will be used in the conventional way. Will get back to steam engines.
That could happen, but one of the problems with coal is even more environmentally unfriendly than oil. And coal produces a much more carbon dioxide than oil. So I would hope that would never happen, just because I just don't think the Earth can take that much more pollution.
Do you think there's a chance that new sources of energy will be discovered?
It's always possible. Like people 10 years ago didn't know about some of the energy sources that I was talking about just now. Not natural gas, but tar sand was not really, like, it was known of, but no one really knew what to do with it. And now recent technology has come out in order that will allow tar sand to be converted into oil. Like 10 years ago, we didn't have that technology. So yes, there's always constantly new sources of energy emerging. And I think there's going to be new sources of renewable energy that will emerge in the future as well.
About taking something from the Earth, from the planet, and run it.
Oh yeah, it's all fossil fuels.
Is it possible that some sources of energy from the Earth will be found in the outer space?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know much about that.
Well, to launch more satellites, to have more solar batteries on them, and find a way of transmitting the energy this way to the Earth.
I think that's definitely possible. Yeah, translate up it. So basically putting satellites closer to the sun to harness the sun's energy more. Yeah, I think it's definitely possible.